Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Sotah, page 31, which reminds me of one of my favorite movies called The Bronx Tale, which discusses a situation where you have a young, influential teenager who turns to a gang member and member of the mafia, and he asks him, the people that serve you, do you prefer that they love you or do you prefer that they fear you? And his answer was quite fascinating. He actually said that even though it's a great question, he feels that fear is much more important because love can come and go, and all of a sudden they're not going to do what you ask them to do. But if you're afraid, then they're much more likely to listen to what I have to say, which seems to me, interestingly enough, a contradiction to our Gemara, which is really not a contradiction at all. But nonetheless, it's fascinating that this question was posed in the Talmud. When it comes to serving God, is it better to serve God out of love or out of fear? So on this, the Talmud says that serving out of love is a higher level than serving God out of fear. And in fact, the reward that a person receives will last for 2,000 generations if you serve God out of love, as opposed to if you serve God out of fear, 1,000 generations, which is still a lot. The question is, what does that mean? And does this actually contradict this famous movie? And I'd like to say no. Because, first of all, if we understand this, a person could fear someone because they are scared that they're going to get punished, something bad is going to happen to them, or when it comes to the mafia, you understand what potentially could happen. So if a person has this level of fear, they're doing what they're doing specifically because they're scared of that individual. But as generations go by, as time elapses, as you are more distant from that person, you're not going to have that fear because you know you're not going to get caught. So therefore, when it comes to these generations, if you will, it means the separation from that individual. So when a person serves out of fear, that will not actually last as long as love. Love, even though it's something in which is developed and it takes much more time to cultivate, but when you do something out of love, you're not just doing it because you are afraid of the consequences. Even if there were no consequences, even if there was no, so to speak, reward, you would still do it because you have a close connection. You have an emotional tie to that individual. So we can understand, certainly, love is something which is much more powerful. It's much harder to achieve. And therefore, what is being said in the Bronx Tale is that even though it's true, it does show a higher level of connection to me, but it's something which is harder for people to get to. And therefore, if it's harder to get to, it's also something which is easier for a person to lose. So if a person only loves this mafia man, that love can come and go. And therefore, all of a sudden, he can get into trouble being a boss. However, if someone fears you, that's something which is much more easy to get to. It's a much easier level to achieve, to have someone fear you. And that's something in which, on some level, can be retained. However, again, that doesn't reflect the actual relationship. The better, closer relationship a person can have is actually loving someone than fearing them. And this is one of the things that was emphasized in this movie, that these people didn't actually respect him. They only did things because they were scared. And therefore, the truth is, that's not a real enduring relationship. You know that you don't really have an emotional connection to a person if the only reason why they laugh at your jokes or that they hang out with you is because they're afraid of you. So you don't really have any connection to that person, or certainly not a very strong one. So love is a much more powerful emotion, which is the reason why God asks us that we should love him with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our might. That is the much higher level that a person should achieve. And therefore, even though it's true, it seemingly goes against one of my favorite movies, nonetheless, it's clear that love is more powerful.